This video marks the start of a new rebuild series. I'm about to do a full teardown of this Honda XL600LM with the goal of building a version on steroids, borrowing parts from the Honda XR and other more performing bikes. In this episode I will remove the engine and disassemble it completely to inspect the conditions. What you see here is an Honda XL600LM. It's one of those iconic big enduro bikes that became an icon in the early 90s and late 80s, following the success of the Paris-Dakar rally. The commercial product, what you see here, was and is much different from the actual bike that would race the Paris-Dakar rally. But nevertheless, it's quite an enjoyable bike to ride even after 40 years. And for such an old bike, it is actually quite advanced. It has tubeless wheel already, Kickstarter as well as electric starter. It has a huge fuel tank of I think about 25 liters or a little bit more, which allows to do more than 500 kilometers with it. It has almost 86,000 kilometers, but with these bikes you never really know how many kilometers are real. But it was running and I actually used it for the past 2 years, mostly to commute to work, as well as a couple of short trips here and there. And I got it for a very good price. Not only the bike itself, which I paid about 1,500 euros, but with it I got so many parts. Another fuel tank, front masks, handlebars, a complete set of wheels, boxes full of spare parts, gaskets, sprockets, levers, all sort of stuff. I have over here 2 carburetors, wires, another piston or 2. I've got I also have rear shocks in there. Here I have 2 sets of front forks, swing arm, exhaust. So yeah, I've got so many. Wait, and I almost forgot. Over here we have 2 extra engines. They're not complete. I don't really know much about the history of this bike, as the previous owner, the one I bought it from, just had it for a couple of months. He bought it for his son, a couple of years younger than me, but apparently he didn't like it. Yeah, that's a bit the thing with these old bikes. You either love them or hate them. There's not much of an in-between. So they just wanted to get rid of it. But that means they themselves didn't know much about the bike. They just bought it from another guy that I don't know why he sold it. Looking at all the parts I have here, my feeling is that someone before bought at least another bike that just used for parts, as I really have the feeling that I have another complete bike in boxes. The idea with this one now is, as the bike is already in pretty decent conditions compared to the previous projects I worked on, it doesn't have an obvious problem. My idea is to strip it apart completely and rebuild it from the frame up. I'm gonna paint it, the frame, take apart the engine, check the conditions, and then during the rebuild process I'm thinking about some upgrades, especially in the suspensions department, to improve it a little bit, as now it's quite poor, the handling. As you probably know by the previous builds on this channel, I don't just like to rebuild bikes to keep them in the garage. I actually like to rebuild them and do some sort of adventure or racing with them. So I have some ideas in mind with this one too, but I'll tell you more later when the build is over. The idea is to get the engine out first. So that means sides has to go, seat, fuel tank, carburetor, probably airbox at that point anyway. The first thing to remove is the side plastic, which in my case is not original. Then I move to the left hand side, 2 bolts for the seat, and it's ready. Now seat goes off. There we go. I mean, the fuel tank should be fairly straightforward, just these two screws over here, and then should just slide off. One thing that I didn't really think of, but it's quite obvious, I have to empty the engine oil. And on this bike, it's a bit particular as there's an oil reservoir directly embedded in the frame. So yes, next step, oil, and then we go on from there. Off goes the skid plate so that I can reach the drain plug. Surprisingly, no oil comes out. Okay, so this is the first concerning thing. I've removed the plug from here. That should have emptied the whole oil tank, but nothing came out of it. Next step is the drain plug down there. Alright, so as you can see, oil is coming out from there, and it was quite a lot. So yeah, good side is that the engine did not run without oil. Most likely the oil tank drained fully in the engine block, but we will get to that in a moment. Before that, I removed the muffler and unplugged the wires so that I can take off the rear mudguard and the luggage rack. Okay, so exhaust is off, and I actually always try to put back the bolts where I took them off from when possible, so that, you know, this thing might stay there for 6 months before I put it back together, and then I know where the bolt is supposed to go. Next, yeah, it's gonna be the airbox and battery case here, sliding back so that the carburetor can come off. The boss is back. Ciao.
Hallo,
Hello.
chi c'è?
Just me and you.
Ciao!
I gotta go. I do one last try with the removal of the airbox, but no luck for now. I was fighting with the airbox more than I expected to. The idea is that this should slide back and the carburetor should come off, but this cannot slide back because of this touching the frame, but it cannot move to the side either. The manual says that I should remove the top bolt of the suspension, but I don't really see why. I don't know. I'm gonna gonna keep going with it and see what happens. I managed to solve the Japanese puzzle. I don't think I did it the proper way, as I mean, just look at the mess I had to do to get the airbox out. In the end, I removed the rear shock. I managed to slide it, so I unbolted it, which was not that easy. It was very tight, and then slide it basically to the side there and up. There was just the right space to do that. Had to remove the exhaust, some other parts. Unbelievable. But yes, next, carburetors. And here we got the carburetor, but the two of them. It's the first time that I work on a bike with double carburetor for a single cylinder. So I'm gonna have to study how they work, if they have to be synchronized. So the cable pulls there and opens both of them at the same time. With the carburetor off, it is just a matter of disconnecting a few cables and hoses before I can finally remove the engine. I disconnect the breather tube after heating it up. Next are the cables for the decompressor and the oil pipe that goes back to the tank. On the left hand side I disconnect the clutch cable, the starter motor wire, the foot peg and then the chain sprocket, which I will anyway replace with a new one. Back on the right hand side I remove all the things that are in the way, like the foot peg, the kickstarter, the brake light switch and the pedal. I also remove the chain so that it is not in the way when I have to move the frame around. Finally I can unbolt the engine mounts on the top and front, loosen up the remaining bolts and it's ready. Okay, everything is ready. I just have to remove that bolt there and this one here. Surprisingly, it was they were already loose. I don't know why. It's gonna be quite heavy, but yeah, let's see. Okay. Luckily, there it is on the bench. I'm using this wooden frame thing. It's first time I use something like that. I'm gonna see if it works fine or not, otherwise I'm gonna build a custom-made engine mount. Before I get to work on the engine, let's take a look at the frame of the bike. Overall, actually, it's not too bad. I didn't have any bolt that was stuck. Yeah, there is quite some rust, but it's mostly superficial from what I've seen so far. Allora, it's time to start the teardown of the engine. Well, I don't expect big problems as the engine was running and I think I did drive it for almost 10,000 kilometers. So no big issues with the engine. There was only, I don't know, something off at around 4,000 RPM that it was vibrating. It had a bit of a weird vibration and also the power delivery was, I don't know, it felt off. As usual, we start from the top, going down and removing all the parts, checking the condition and for sure replacing gaskets, probably bearings, and see if there's anything else. Removing the valve cover is quite straightforward. First I disconnect the decompressor cable, then the intake manifold and the oil line. The top M5 bolts come loose without problems, but valve caps are surprisingly tight, considering that I was the last one touching them. I had to go the hard way with a pneumatic gun. Okay, so now all of the bolts are out. I struggled a bit with the caps here, they were very tight. So next, another thing which is damaged, and this is not looking too nice, is this long bolt that from the front over here goes all the way down in the cylinder itself, I believe. And judging by this, I would guess that the thread in the cylinder is gone because it is on the screw, on the bolt. Yeah, that might also be something that I have to take care of. Now I can take the valve cover off. I use a rubber hammer to move it a little bit. Okay, so here we actually see something already quite interesting. So normally the cover is on the engine like this, right? So these two are the exhaust valves and on this side there's the intake. And this is the automatic decompressor. So what it does, as you can see here, by turning, it pushes down a little bit the one of the two exhaust valves. So it opens up a little bit the head, reducing the compression. That's why it's called decompressor. And the purpose of it is that when you have less compression, it's easier to move the piston up and down. So when starting the bike, especially with a Kickstarter, then it's much easier to do that. Now you see here it has two cables going in. One is connected on this side to the Kickstarter, so it's automatic in the sense that when pushing down the Kickstarter, it will automatically pull this one and lift the valve slightly. Or on the other side you have the other cable that goes on the handlebar and can be done manually as well. I think it's quite cool. So anyway, what I have to do now is to remove this pin over here and then slide out the mechanism there, and then all the arms.
With just one Allen key I can unbolt the 4 shafts and disassemble the arms that push the valves for inspection.
These, the manual calls them rocker arm, and these ones are the sub-rocker arm, rocker shafts, sub-rocker shaft. Now, what I should do is measure the inner diameter here. So there is a maximum it can be. If it gets too big, then it has play and it's worn off. It means it's worn off and it is to change. Same for the outer diameter of the shaft, but in the opposite direction. So if this one gets too small, below the minimum, then it's worn. And same for the sub-rockers. It says, for example, for the rocker arm, the service limit is 11.55 millimeters. So this one is 11.59, it means it's slightly bigger. I mean, the measurement taken with this one, it's not that precise.
All the measurements here are a bit off, like this one is a bit too small compared to the limit. These ones are a bit too big. I think the good thing is that I don't feel any there's no, how's it called, scoring or marks or any damage or anything like that I can feel or see on on any of the parts. Also here where it's pushing down the other arm there, and then the valve, there's a sign you can see there, but that's normal. Come on, focus. That's normal and you don't really feel it. So okay, time to get the camshaft off. Should be fairly straightforward. First I have to remove the screw over here that allows me to turn the tensioner, then put a screwdriver in so I can remove tension from the chain. There is actually a proper tool to hold the tensioner in place, but I did not get to buy it yet. While I hold the tensioner to release the chain, I turn the camshaft and unbolt the 2 bolts that secure the sprocket to the shaft.
Alright, time to get it off. So you see already the sprocket is loose. I already removed one bearing from here, and now I should just be able to slide it off. Normally, if you're just doing the top end, it's a good idea to secure the chain so that it doesn't fall down. I'm gonna place a screwdriver in for now. One strange thing, so over here there's one bearing, on the other side there's the other one, right? And you see here there's this kind of pin to keep the bearing in position so that it doesn't slide off. And there should be another one here too, also according to the manual, but there's nothing. So
the lobes of the camshaft are stressed components, as they have to push the arms thousands of times per minute. There is a little bit of damage on the surface, so I will have to check carefully if it is a first sign of the case hardening giving up. Another thing I noticed are the scratches in the middle of the shaft, which match with the brown markings on the head. Probably they were caused by the missing bearing pin that allowed the shaft to move horizontally.
The sprocket itself seems to be fine. I don't see any scoring or damaged tooth or missing material. Yeah, next is to remove the cylinder head. So there are 6 bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, plus 2 on the side over here. Then I can lift it off and then I will disassemble it.
When it gets to this point, it is always a gamble if the bolts will be stuck or not with all the heat cycle they have to endure. Luckily, everything goes smoothly this time.
Okay, so all the bolts should be off. These two were quite tight, so I struggled a bit to get them out, but I managed without damaging anything. So that's a win already. Now, I expect the head to be, a bit stuck there, so that's why I'm gonna use a rubber hammer to gently. No, it's quite. It's already loose. Look at this. Okay, I'm gonna put a small screwdriver here to hold the chain, and there we go. Ta-da! A common defect of this engine head is that somewhere over here, where the spark plug goes, there's frequently happens, I don't know on which side, but either one of the 4 here, kind of a fracture in the material because there's not enough material and it breaks. You see here that it breaks, and here too. Yeah, then that's basically the end of it. It's also very hard to weld it back, and most likely it's not gonna hold. So this is good to nothing, but the one I have over there seems fine so far. I think I'm gonna continue with disassembling the head first, and then continue here. Actually, I have no idea what this is for. No gasket, no oil, nothing in there, no hole or passage of anything. It looks like brand new. On this side, I can't really get this one off. I mean, the manual says it should be turned clockwise, which it does very easily. I can also do it with my hand. All right, done. So I found a nice YouTube video of someone doing the same thing and figured that indeed I just need to pull. I just had to pull very hard. That's why I used this one to get it out. Now this is it has a one-way bearing inside, so that means that it can rotate one way but not the other. So I can rotate it clockwise but not the other, and then the spring is what push the tensioner towards the chain guide and keep the chain in tension. New tool arrived. Actually, it took less than 24 hours, so quite impressive. This should be, well, this should do the job. I can get the valves off, and then the cylinder head is done. Let's see how it works. It's the first time I do this in my entire life. It is a very simple tool. It takes just a few seconds to understand how to use it. Yet, it makes a big difference in compressing the valves and safely removing the clips, which otherwise would turn into one of those extremely frustrating tasks. And that went very smooth with a new tool. It's actually not that expensive. I think I paid it like 30 euros. Definitely worth it. So, double spring. Now the valve itself, so the things to check, as far as I know of, are that it has to be straight, first of all. Then checking for any sign of overheating. Of course, here in this part, which is the one
exposed to the exhaust gases. There's some remains of the combustion as well as here. Then another thing to check is the seal over here. Another thing that I think has to be checked is the seat of the valve, so that it's not broken or damaged, otherwise it wouldn't close properly. So it is important to not mix up, you know, different springs, different valves, and especially the position of the valve, as they kinda, you know, get to work together over the thousands of kilometers and find their own shape. So now it's just a matter of repeating same procedure with the other exhaust valve and the two intake ones. Let's go, time lapse.
The procedure is the same for all the other three valves. Position the tool, compress the spring, and then use the pliers to remove the two halves of the clip. The reason of having two springs for each valve is because the spring has to compress and release at high speed with the engine rotation, and one spring might reach specific frequencies where it bounces against itself and floats between the camshaft and the seat.
There we go. Again, measurement time. All sort of measurements. Measurement of the springs length, then measurement of the diameter, measurement of the inner diameter of the guides.
The 4-cylinder bolts are the most critical ones, as they are very tight, and if they strip, they are a nightmare because they are not easily accessible. Don't ask me how I know.
Okay, so now I just have to find a way to unstuck the cylinder head, the cylinder, without breaking any of the flanges here.
It is indeed quite a delicate job, and I bet there is a proper tool for this, but with a lot of patience I managed to get it done.
There we go. It was a bit of a struggle to get it out, because all of these flanges are very fragile, and I did manage to damage one of them on the Dominator engine, so I had to be very careful, but improvising some leverage and tools, then it worked. So let's get the cylinder out. Ta-da! The piston. So I would have for sure to measure it later to make sure that it is still round and it didn't become egg-shaped. If I do keep it, I'm gonna replace the piston rings anyway, because they are relatively cheap. Yeah, it's a bit of a shame that I don't know the history of this engine, because it would be really cool to know if it is actually an engine with 80,000 kilometers. Okay, time to get the piston clip out. I feel like a dentist. Oh no, where did it go? So now, should be easy enough to slide this one out and get the piston off. Okay, now I would have to take all the measurements. We are talking about diameter of this one, diameter of this one, gap. I would have to check also the cylinder head to make sure that it is still level and flat and not warped. Is that how you say it? I guess. The problem is that with the tools I have, I mean, with this one I can only take measurements that are relatively precise, and for this kind of stuff, for the engine, we are talking about fractions of millimeters. So I think the most important thing that I will check is that it feels and looks right. All right, piston time. Yeah, I'm just gonna remove the piston rings, check the gap, and then put it aside. And next, the engine block, the bottom end. The piston has two compression rings at the top and then the oil ring at the bottom that controls the amount of engine oil on the cylinder wall. I place the rings back in a cylinder to check the gap between the two ends with a feeler gauge.
Okay, so where were we? Top end is done. Now it's time to do the bottom end, starting from this side.
To remove the side case, it is just a matter of unbolting the many M5 bolts all around the perimeter. I lay the engine on the side as oil continues dripping out, and I proceed with scraping the remains of the gasket. With the clutch disassembled, it is once again time to measure the components: spring length, discs and plates thickness. The manual says that the service limit for the spring is 43.1 mm. All of them seem to be within specs, and as I remember not having particular problems with the clutch, there is no reason to replace them. The same goes for the discs and the plates. For the plates, I mostly check if they show sign of overheating and color change, while for the discs I measure the thickness.
2.94, 2.95, 2.93.
One final important check is for the clutch basket. I check the indentation of the inside basket to make sure that there are no perceivable grooves where the plates could get stuck. The same check also for the outer basket, which, even though has visible marks, must be smooth enough to allow the plates to slide freely. I then move on removing the oil pump, which I will disassemble completely as it is a critical component in the engine lubrication. Even though the way the pump works is quite simple, the damage it can do when it stops working is massive. One of the issues which I also had with the Dominator is with the tiny valve that regulates the oil flow. The goal is to prevent the oil tank from emptying in the engine when the bike is not running, as it is a dry sump engine. Pressure from the pump pushes the valve, which slides to open the passage of oil. If it gets stuck though, it can either starve the engine of oil or, like in this case, drain the whole tank in the block. That's why earlier there was no oil coming out of the oil tank. So I'm about to open it up to check the tolerances and replace the old seals. First thing, I remove the split clip so that I can slide off the valve with the spring and washer. Then there are 3 screws on the back of the pump that keep it together. Unfortunately, they use Phillips head, which is super easy to strip, and indeed I have to cut through them to finally get the screws out. The pump is made of 3 main body parts and 2 pair of rotors. The manual says to check the clearance between the body and the outside rotor and between the 2 rotors. Luckily they are well within the limits, so I just have to repeat the same for the other half.
Alright, so now is mainly a matter of removing the remaining parts. So we have the drive gear, the kickstarter and the shift thing, chain guide, and that's it for this side. Let's go.
The remaining components are quite straightforward to remove, mostly a matter of unbolting a couple of screws. The Kickstarter gear is a bit more complex, as it has the spring keeping it in tension and it needs the Kickstarter lever to rotate it and unclip the spring.
Okay, so now this part is done, completely free. Just have to turn the engine the other side and do the left hand side case.
I start by removing the starter cover and the 2 gears, then unscrew the few bolts around the perimeter of the case and with a bit of leverage remove the cover.
Right, so now that the side case is off, I'm gonna remove the alternator here and then the flywheel, hoping that the extractor for the flywheel is the same as the Dominator. So far so good actually. No bolts stuck, nothing broke, everything seems to be okay, but yeah, it doesn't really surprise me as the bike was running before without big problems, so.
3 screws hold the stator in place, then I slide out the wires with care as they're old and brittle. The flywheel comes out without problems with the extractor. Having the right tools makes a huge difference.
Okie dokie, the flywheel is out, no problems. This one is the starter clutch, so it's like the one direction, one-way clutch, that this one goes on top, and then basically this is what the starter motor connects to, and
This one you see can turn only one direction, but not the other. On the Dominator engine, this was faulty, but this one seems to be fine. Then it's just a matter of removing the bearing, and yeah, there is a washer. I always have to double check with these washers as they stick to their place with oil until I move the engine around, and then they drop, and then I have no idea where they came from. So I always have to double check. But yeah, well, that's it. Basically now I can split the two cases. And indeed, I jinxed it before when I said that so far I had no screws stuck. For the crankcase, 2 of them are stripped, but with a bit of patience and the help of the Dremel, I managed to get them out. Finally, I can carefully split the engine and get to the heart of it. There we go! Ready to split the engine. It was a bit of a struggle in this position here because that's where the engine mounts to the frame. Also in the front, but this one is closer to the swing arm and the back wheel. So it is very tight together and it gets rusty, so then it gets stuck. You know, the manual always says don't use a screwdriver, don't put anything in between to make leverage, because then the surface gets damaged and then it's not level and matching anymore, and then it's gonna leak oil and this kind of stuff. But I don't know how I could have done it any different. Okay. Huh. Oh shit. I think I should have done the other side. Ah. Yes. Alright. So, engine is open. At a quick look, I haven't seen anything concerning. What I'm going to do now is to take out all the gears as well as the crank shaft. Take all the measurements, inner diameters, outer diameters, inspect if I see anything wrong, especially consider the problem I had in the past with the shifting fork. Most likely I'm gonna replace the bearings, because I mean the bike has theoretically 80,000 kilometers. I don't know if they have been replaced before or not. I want to paint all of them, all of the red parts. I want to paint them again, and that's going to be a new addition to the workshop. All the tools needed for that, but we'll check that out later. I find the gearbox always very intriguing and a bit intimidating because of all the moving parts that precisely fit together, the thin shims and the many bearings. I proceed with disassembling both shafts by removing the many clips that hold the gears in place so that I can closely check them and measure them. I'm disassembling all the gears from the shaft. So here are the gears with a, the clip. Gears move around, and depending on which gear you select, it's going to engage either one side or the other, and they engage by mean of these small things here. And if they round off, so if the edge is not sharp anymore, then it's gonna start slipping one in the other. And then of course it doesn't work properly. So I'm checking also that these are right. I'm checking in general that also these ones are okay. So in the meantime, we have all the engine parts over here. So all of the engine in bits and bolts. Okay, so now I have to decide what I want to replace. So sit down at the desk, computer, make a table, part numbers, and decide what to replace, what not.
most of the components are within specifications, so in theory I shouldn't have to replace anything, but yeah, considering the mileage and the use that I want to do with it, I'd rather replace things early than having them breaking down later on and having to do the job again. So let's see. But now, yeah, I'm gonna order the parts and see you soon.